Hello and welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm your host, ILTV Editor-in-Chief Maayan Hoffman. I want to begin today's program with a moment of silence in honor of the 6 hostages who were brutally murdered by Hamas just a few days ago. One of those hostages was Hersh Goldberg-Polin, an American-Israeli who became a household name over the past 11 months. He was recently laid to rest. His parents had fought tirelessly to bring him home. I want to hear a clip from Rachel Goldberg-Polin at her son's funeral yesterday.
Okay, sweet boy, go now on your journey. I hope it's as good as the trips you dreamed about, because finally, my sweet boy, finally, you're free. I will love you and I will miss you every single day for the rest of my life. But you're right here. I know you're right here. I just have to teach myself how to feel you in a different way. And Hersh, there's one last thing I need you to do for us. Now I need you to help us stay strong. And I need you to help us survive.
Joining me today are Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem and Israel's Special Envoy for Trade and Innovation, and Vivian Bercovici, former Canadian Ambassador to Israel and editor of the popular Substack and podcast, The State of Tel Aviv. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Maayan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Watching Rachel Goldberg-Polin bury her son yesterday was heart-wrenching. I've been deeply affected, feeling a profound sadness, honestly. For the last few days, it just brings you to tears every time that you watch a clip like that. And for him and for all of the hostages and their families, who, like mine, for him specifically, like our own, he made Aliyah. Our sons could be Hersh, and it's unimaginable. So I want to start by just asking you, how has Israel changed in the last 11 months? How has Israel changed overnight with the murder of those 6 hostages? Fleur, maybe you can start by talking to that.
Well, first of all, I want to say, Maayan, that for me, it's very difficult because I know Hersh since he's a kid. I was at his bar mitzvah. I know his parents, and I have watched in awe in the last 11 months how they've become international ambassadors, not just for their son, but the whole cause of the hostages. So eloquent, so strong, so dignified, never falling into the politicization of this, never attacking anybody, not being negative for one second, and watching the eulogies to their son. And I have to say that I really did believe in my heart of hearts that he was going to come home, as we all did. And this has been almost like the crushing of hope more than anything. How has Israel changed? I think we've lost our innocence, at least in this generation. We're in the worst position that the Jewish people has ever been in, not just in Israel, but also abroad around the world. And for me, the killing, the murder of these 6 hostages has been a reliving of the 7th of October. I've woken up this morning and yesterday morning with the same feeling that I woke up with on the 8th and the 9th of October, in disbelief, with a horrible pain in the pit of my stomach. We are re-traumatized every single day with this conflict. So yes, this country has changed and we've all changed tremendously.
Vivian, share your thoughts as well.
So it's just so hard to watch that clip. It's gut-wrenching, for all of the reasons that Fleur said and that you said. And I don't know the family personally, but I agree with absolutely everything that Fleur just said. So I just want to briefly add to that I think that our kind of soul, our national soul, has been so gutted. It's still there, but we need to take care of it and be kind to one another and ourselves. And we need to be very serious in how we focus on preserving this incredible state that's been created over the last 76 years, because we are in an existential war. I see the clips you're showing. It's real, it's serious, and we need leadership to help us pick ourselves up and to keep moving forward. I think that it's changed in the sense that this generation and all of us now are facing a truly existential, shocking, horrifying moment that never ends. And there's no playbook about how to manage this, and we got to figure this out because we're not so far doing as good a job as we should.
100%. And I mean, I think that one of the things that we saw last night was Netanyahu, for the first time in a very long time, he stood up and he gave a press conference, and he insisted during that press conference that we maintain the Philadelphia corridor for security, while Hamas says no, and that there will not be a ceasefire hostage deal if we insist on keeping this corridor. 500,000 Israelis were in the streets demanding the return of those hostages on Sunday nights. Who is right here, or is everyone right? I mean, Fleur, what are we seeing? It's really confusing.
I completely understand the families of the hostages and people being angry and frustrated at the government. It's very natural. We are a robust democracy. We're used to criticizing our leaders. Our leaders got us into this mess. A lot of people have a lot to say about the way that this war has been managed. But at the same time, let's not forget that it was the fatal mistake of 2005 of the disengagement, but more than that, of the giving up of the Philadelphia corridor that got us into this mess to begin with. So on the other hand, I do understand the insistence on not becoming more vulnerable again. Why does Hamas want us out of the Philadelphia corridor? Because they want to continue to rearm. One of the aims of this war is to destroy Hamas governance in the Gaza Strip. And how can we do that if they can still be allowed to let in armaments? At the same time, I also think if it's a temporary removal of Israeli troops from Philadelphia corridor, and we can go back in at any given moment, we should do everything in our power to get out the remaining hostages, because ultimately that is it's an injury on our soul if we don't manage to get out the living whilst there's still some time.
Yeah, and I think what you just said, about the idea of our soul, and both of you have touched on that, the soul of the country. So, Vivian, if you can also talk to that about why it is so crucial to bring these hostages home, beyond the obvious reason of that we need to bring them home, but why is it important for the state of Israel?
Because the state of Israel exists for one reason, and it's to provide a secure national homeland for Jewish people. And we've always lived by a credo that we all know, which is leave no one behind. And that we will do absolutely everything, whether it's a soldier or a civilian in captivity, to bring them home. And that's where the questions come in this time, is are we doing everything? And I think there are many people who feel that things aren't being done that should have, could have, would have. But here we are today, 11 months on, and we must do this, because if we don't, then people are going to look around like you, whose sons go into the army, and say, am I prepared to make this sacrifice? We give up, and we put up with a lot. There's a ledger to living in Israel, and there's so much good, and there's also a lot that the state asks of us. And that we give, and we want one thing in return. And the state was not there for us. When I say state, I mean, and the army. On October 7th, we, the people, were let down in an inconceivable way. And every day since has been that same experience relived, in different intensities by different people, obviously. Excuse me, but that's what's at stake here. That's what's at stake, is why are we here?
And what's amazing is that the world, I don't think, understands that. I received this very threatening letter this morning. I woke up to my inbox having a letter because I wrote a column about the challenges here in Israel after the hostages were murdered. And the letter said, how can you even, worry about what Hamas has done? Look what Israel is doing, as if Hamas can do nothing wrong and Israel can only do everything wrong. Why is that, Fleur? Why is the world against Israel?
Well, its double standards are actually been speaking a lot to the press today about this, and you can't look at it any other way. The fact that, for example, just one example, yesterday the UK announced that they're not going to be exporting a certain type of military equipment to Israel, which is really logistically insignificant for us. And there are people in England saying, well, we provide weaponry to Qatar, we provide weaponry to Saudi, we provided weaponry to Yemen. Why is this obsession with Israel? Why is this double standard with Israel? And to me, it's very simple. Double standard and obsession means only one thing. It's just a modern form of anti-Semitism. I'm really not one of those paranoid Jews that sees anti-Semitism everywhere. But it's very difficult to believe that the obsession with this conflict and this conflict alone, when you see what's going on in the rest even of the Arab world, when you see what happened in Syria, when you see what happens in Africa within the different tribes and all those people who die and all the starvation and all the famine, and yet there's one conflict that the world obsesses about. It's very difficult to see it as anything else. And I completely agree with what Vivian's saying. Ultimately, we have to protect our own people. And I think the whole idea, the whole ethos of the State of Israel is we will not rely on other people to protect us anymore, because we can't, and eventually they'll let us down. And so we have to make sure that we don't let our own people down, because it is the founding ethos of our country.
But are we doing a good job at that? I mean, honestly, Vivian, you were the ambassador from Canada here in Israel. You know the Canadian community very well, the North American community. And the truth of the matter is that anti-Semitism, as Fleur is describing, is rampant everywhere. And Israel has responsibility for the Jews here, but it also has a responsibility in some way for the Jews in the diaspora. And Vivian, are we doing it? Are we able to protect the Jews around the world?
So I have a little bit of a problem with that assumption that Israel's got its hands full, and to sort of state that it's Israel's responsibility to protect Jews around the world. Israel can't be everywhere. It's a small country. It's got its hands full in its own territory. I'm in Canada at the moment, as you can see in the background. And Canada has distinguished itself in recent months as being one of the most hostile Western countries in the world. And my hometown city, which is not far from where I sit at the moment, Toronto, is an absolute disaster. I'm not sure that Israel has a place in that mix. I think that the community here has a tremendous responsibility, and it needs to do its job more. I think Israel's responsibility is in being there, thriving, existing, and being open and accepting if anyone wants to come and live or work or, dialogue, whatever it is. But I think it's overstating it, in my view, that Israel's responsibility is to take care of us in these far-flung places. It's our responsibility.
I will disagree with Vivian on one thing. I agree with her in general, but ultimately, what you mentioned earlier, Maayan, about media and why the obsession and why the bias, ultimately, that does affect the diaspora. And the fact that Israel has never really had a credible communication strategy bothers me very much. Because when I go around the world speaking, what I give people in the diaspora is strength. It's arguments, it's tools to defend themselves. And I don't think we've been there enough.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting.
So we could have a whole show on that, but we won't.
well, you can. If we want to, we could go into that. But I think we should also talk about the upcoming... Another show, because I think right now I would like to move to the U.S. election, because I have two people who are definitely very in tune with what's going on and have worked in the international community. Election is coming up in a couple of months in the United States. There are two candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Fleur, which candidate is better for Israel, if either, and why?
Well, you're putting me on a very difficult spot here, Maya,
and I know
because
that.
I think that one of the things that Israel always has to do is remain bipartisan and make sure that we can work with any government. And I'm not going to be campaigning for one side or the other. And I'm very, very careful. But I'm very concerned by, in general, by the Democratic Party policy on the Middle East. We have, in the last year, on the one side, incredible support from President Biden coming to Israel immediately in the aftermath of 7th of October, providing Israel with what you need. And on the other hand, releasing billions and billions of dollars to Iran, who are the state sponsors of all the terrorism around the world, certainly the terrorism that we're suffering from. You have a country that is, I don't think, doing enough to deal with their own internal issues of Islamic fundamentalism. They want to ignore it. You have Kamala Harris saying only a couple of weeks ago she doesn't want to say the word Islamic fundamentalism. So brushing really the main sponsors of world terrorism under the carpet. And that concerns me tremendously. You also have the United States that I don't think are pulling enough levers with the Qatari government that can really be helpful here with this deal. America just renegotiated its lease as a military base in Qatar. Why is that not conditional on something that we asked for Qatar? And, you know, what I've called, or I've renamed Goebbels TV, Al Jazeera, which is literally the global propagator of Jew hatred, allowed to run free in America when the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and now Israel has made them illegal. And so I think that in general, the Democratic Party have never really gotten the Middle East. And then on the other hand, you have President Trump, so love him or hate him, and I know that he's a very divisive figure, but he brought the Abraham Accords. That's just a fact. And he stands for people respecting the United States as strong. So I don't want to get involved in internal American politics. And I understand why people love and hate Trump, and I understand why people love and hate Harris internally for American policy. But when it comes to Middle East policy, in general, the Democratic Party, since the days of Obama, have got it all wrong when it comes to the Middle East.
And let's actually take that a step further. You know, you mentioned Qatar, and I think it's very interesting, this whole idea that we're using Qatar and Egypt to help to broker this ceasefire agreement. These are two countries that we understand Qatar has been allowing Hamas to run freely for, you know, the last number of years, a terrorist organization. In Egypt, we understand now that all of the weapons that were being smuggled in, that they were turning a blind eye and they knew that it was happening. Are these viable partners to be negotiating the ceasefire? And if they are the ones negotiating it, should or should not Netanyahu sign it? Vivian, what do you think?
I think you've just hit the nail on the head. It's a farce. But I would like to add that Israel has also been very aware of how Philadelphia corridor and the tunnels between Egypt and the Gaza Strip have been used for the last number of years. So there's been a lot of kind of looking away, and a lot of that has to be explained. I've not understood from day one, from October 7th, when this horror began, why the U.S. just didn't shut down all of Qatar's bank accounts. I mean, they can do that.
Exactly.
Even threaten to do it, because that would have taken care of it. I mean, I think you guys were both absolutely right and just a little too kind for my liking with respect to Qatar and Egypt. Qatar finances Islamist terror all over the world. Fact. You know, so they put on good suits and they start up this, Al Jazeera network, and they make it look nice, but it's not nice. And they are a major ally of the United States, and we're sitting with them. Well, when I say we, I mean the West and the U.S. leading that. I would have thought the U.S. would have used its levers, and I don't think we've seen that. Now, I've not been in the room, Fleur's not been in the room, you've not been in the room, but it's pretty clear that if they'd threatened to, go after Qatari assets early on, just as they're doing with the International Criminal Court judge, that would have probably changed the outcome.
And then we would have been in a very different place today.
Hugely problematic. And Egypt too. Egypt is what it is.
Yeah.
There's a reason Egypt didn't want us in the Philadelphia corridor.
So, we're going to run out of time, and I want to ask at least one final question, which I think is actually very important because it's so heavy, this whole scenario. And I believe in the state of Israel. I think we all here have spoken about why we need Israel and that we're Zionists and that this is going to, somehow, we're going to come out ahead. But I guess I'm questioning how, and I'm wondering if each of you can take 30 seconds, 40 seconds to answer the question of where do we go from here? In the aftermath of these 6 hostages being buried, what is next? Fleur, you start, Vivian, you finish, but really 30 seconds.
So I think that the most important thing that we have to bear in mind is that I believe these fundamentalists understand that they can't destroy Israel militarily. So how are they going to try and destroy us? By dividing us from within. If you watch some of bits of those harrowing videos of those hostages before they were brutally murdered, they were told and forced to say, go out on the street And I'm not saying that legitimate protest is not a good thing, but what I'm saying is that we have to not cross the line into hatred and division amongst ourselves, because that is what got us kicked out of our indigenous homeland twice before when we were sovereigns in Israel. And we should not let it happen again, and do everything in our power to fight the enemies that we have together.
Wow, thank you. Vivian, what are your thoughts?
Tone from the top. We need strong, principled, and courageous leadership that leads and doesn't divide, and that speaks to all of its citizens, not just those that vote for it or its base. And I think that we are lacking that. Fleur made the point that, Israel as a state isn't doing enough in terms of Hasbara to explain its case, that kind of skill could be improved. And I think that domestically we need to really get our act together.
100%.
And if we're going to do that, we need leadership. And I don't think that we're seeing that at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for that. So that's all the time, unfortunately, that we do have this evening. I think we could probably talk about this forever. I really want to thank you, both Fleur and Vivian, for being here, and let you know that you can watch this and get further updates, of course, from Israel. You can subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv. You can also purchase and download our app to receive alerts directly to your phone. Thank you so much for watching The Insider tonight. Let's win this war and bring these hostages home.